free world.
Yeah. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Yeah. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so weak. Yeah. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Yeah. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so. Snuff the shooter, snuff the looter, snuff the booster, snuff the money mover. Snuff the hater, snuff the player, snuff your hairline tape.
Hail to the Culture of Washington Redskins podcast. It's your boy Bryce. Back again with my man Rome. Rome, what up, bro?
What's good, bro?
Nothing much, man. Another day and another episode. But today, unlike most, man, we have some pressing news that must be addressed. The legend, the great one, Kobe Bean Bryant has tragically passed, as you all know by now, in the helicopter accident. Let's just right off the bat, man, let's start with a moment of silence for Kobe and all those others lost on that accident. Rest in peace, man. Rest in peace to a legend, an icon, an idol. Any one of those words you want to use, Kobe was that. Rome, you want to share a little bit about Kobe for a second, bro?
Yeah, man. I know this is a football podcast, a podcast about a football team, but that just shows how transcendent Kobe Bryant really was. We just had to take a minute to show our respects to Kobe and his family. Being a parent, the tragedy that happened, it hits real hard and close to home for me. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we gave our thoughts and our prayers to all families that were involved in this tragic accident.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Most definitely. If you're anything like me in Rome, and you were raised in this millennial era, man, Kobe was definitely one of those guys you looked up to, one of those guys that you wanted to be like. I can just remember back in the day working on my own game and just imagine I'm Kobe after every shot. And it's just crazy that that this is what's happened, but this is life. And the one thing we got to do is we got to live in Kobe's honor with that Mamba mentality and keep it pushing and make sure that we're honoring him the right way by living the way that he did, and that was with that Mamba mentality. So let's jump into it, man. I mean, it's a ton of stuff to talk about, in Redskins Nation right now. I mean, where do we start, Ron? Where do we start, bro?
Yeah, man, there's so many changes that have gone down since our last podcast, but let's go ahead and start with the three big changes, and that would be to the coaching staff. Number one is obviously Ron Rivera has been brought in. Along with him came Jack Del Rio for defensive coordinator and Scott Turner for offensive coordinator. Those are some wholesale changes, and we have a lot of thoughts on those. But I also want to mention that the GM spot is still open, so we're also going to get into that today on who we think should be the GM. The word is that they will name the GM after the draft. So real quick, man, let's go ahead and break down our thoughts on these coaching changes, man. What were your initial thoughts when we hired Ron Rivera, and now that the dust is finally settled, how do you feel about that coaching hire?
Well, my very first thought when we hired Ron Rivera was I just felt like it was because the hire happened so quickly once the season was over, and to me it just said that it was a process that had already been undertaken. It screamed to me something that it was already in the works. So I feel like in that regard, Dan Snyder really got his guy. I think that, man, when I first heard the name Ron Rivera, like I just was so happy because I knew that if anything, we got a culture change on the way. One thing we will not have to come to expect with Ron Rivera is guys slacking off. It's guys being jokesters, guys not understanding their responsibilities, guys not being disciplined. I know that side of the team will improve with Ron Rivera. Honestly, when I first heard it, I couldn't have been happier with the hire because it just showed a true shift. I mean, for the last, I'd say 10 seasons, the Redskins have been an offensive-based club. And this is a true shift back to the defensive side, to what we were when we were growing up. We were always a team that had a good defense and a terrible offense, These last 10 years have been a pretty good offense and a terrible defense. And with Ron Rivera, I think that hire alone will end all of that. So those are my first reactions. How about you, bro?
Yeah, man, I agree with most of what you said. Those are my initial reactions as well. The key word that you said was discipline. I feel like Ron Rivera is going to usher in a new era of discipline. There won't be any titty twisters or any silly things like that. He's already removed the ping pong table from the practice facility. So yeah, there's definitely going to be more of a sense of urgency throughout the locker room. Things that I think we're missing, more attention to detail, those kind of things. So yeah, I think it's a great hire, and I agree with you. I think Dan really got on his horse. Whoever he's been talking to, his football people that told him to finally get Bruce Allen gone, were probably advising him on the best way to go about it. And in Ron Rivera's interview, he mentioned how Dan wanted a coach-centered approach, and how most of the teams that had won recently, the Patriots, the Eagles, teams like that, had allowed their coaches to really run the show. So it sounds like Dan's going to let Ron run the show. Those were my initial thoughts, but those were all good things. After the dust started a little bit, I started to think, we heard this a little bit with Marty Schottenheimer back in the day. We all know Dan Snyder has been known to try to force his hand to get the way he wants. So the question that I have now is, will Dan really fall back and allow Ron to run the show? And if so, for how long? If Ron stumbles out the gate, does Dan pull some of that power away? The jury is still out on that, but for the initial thoughts, I definitely like the hire.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point with the coach-centered approach. I definitely think that's where the league is headed. And not maybe so much a coach-centered approach, but I also think that the hierarchy now should be more of a team type of thing. You should have a team, of executives leading you in one direction instead of necessarily a dictatorship where it's a strict chain of command. So I definitely do like this new approach that we're going with. And, yeah, man, I definitely think that the Ron Rivera hire, in hindsight, like you said, now the dust has settled a little bit. In hindsight, man, you got to love the hire, especially when you start looking at who these other teams got. So in hindsight, man, I really, really love this Ron Rivera hire. And I feel like, 3 teams in the NFC East all switched coaches, and I feel like the Skins got the best coach of the bunch.
I agree with that completely. I would take Ron Rivera over Mike McCarthy and who did the Giants get? So a Patriots wide receiver coach? I forgot his name already.
Yeah,
kind of crazy.
They went left field with their hire.
Yeah, kind of crazy. There's a lot of qualified African American coaches out there that they didn't get hired, but that's another pod for another day. Let's go ahead and bounce it to the defensive coordinator, because I actually think that this is a bigger upgrade than the actual head coach. Going from Greg Minuski to Jack Del Rio, in my opinion, is going from like a D to an A+. I absolutely loved this hire when I first heard the news, and even with the dust settled, I still feel the exact same level of excitement for Jack Del Rio. He's known for turning defenses around. He was a pretty good head coach with his time in Oakland as well. And I think it shows a lot of Ron Rivera to hire another coach of that stature, because a lot of coaches won't put another guy who's been a head coach on your staff. That puts a little pressure on you as well. So what were your thoughts on the Jack Del Rio hire?
Bro, I love that hire. Just like you, man. I mean, Jack Del Rio is like, yeah, it's like man, you were nice giving him a D. That's going from an F to an A+. It's almost unbelievable that change right there. I think Jack Del Rio is definitely going to bring a much more attacking style. I think that's going to start with our D-line. I was very excited to hear us changing back to the 4-3. I mean, that's where we've had all of our success on defense over the last 20 years. It's all been in the 4-3. So this 3-4 was an experiment that really just never worked out for us. We were never able to transition into it. So getting out of it is definitely good for us. And I think that our guys on the D-line are going to see, I think, the biggest benefit, the greatest, from us bringing on Del Rio. I mean, John Allen, Matt Ioannidis, Deron Payne are going to be playing a different style of football now, more attacking style of football, getting up the field. And I think that's going to benefit them greatly. And as well as Montez Sweat, man, I feel like Jack Del Rio is just going to turn Montez Sweat into a beast. So I really can't wait, man. I can't wait to see what they do, how fast they turn around the defense. Because one thing I'll say is I do believe they'll turn around the defense, but I don't necessarily think it'll just happen overnight. I don't necessarily think it'll happen from game one. So I will temper my expectations, and I will trust the process Because when you got names like Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio heading your defense, you've got to trust that, even if it doesn't look good at first.
Yeah, man. I want to say this also. There's a few things that we don't know going into this next season. We don't know how great the offense will be. We don't know if Dwayne Haskins will be the franchise quarterback for years to come. We don't know if Darius Geis is going to bounce back from another injury. But one thing I think that we can agree that we do know on, and I'll agree with you given it time, but the defense will be better than it was last year. If there was one thing I had to put money on for the Redskins next year, is that the defense will most definitely be improved from the 2019 campaign.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. We'll get into it on a later pod with how much we both think each side of the ball will improve. But, I can't see us being as trash as we were last year with Jack Del Rio. I just can't see that.
Yeah, it'll never happen. All right, so let's keep it pushing to the offensive coordinator. A familiar name heading back to D.C., Scott Turner, son of former head coach Norv Turner. This was a bit of a surprise to me, but it also shows me that Snyder is also letting Ron Rivera really take control and allowing him to bring in an offensive coordinator that he's familiar with. I was a little bit shocked that they let Kevin O'Connell go. But what were your thoughts on KOC leaving and Scott Turner coming in?
I've got layered thoughts on KOC leaving because first you got to think, why did he leave? The reports are that it was his choice to start the leaving process before continuing in the interview process with Ron Rivera. So from all reports, Kevin O'Connell looked at the entire situation and said, "Hey, I want out." So you just got to think about what he was basing that decision off. Was he basing that decision off of, this is a new regime that doesn't know me, they're not giving me a fair shake? Was he basing that decision off the last 10 years of dysfunction with the Redskins and more change? Or was he basing that decision off of something more dealing with the player side? Was he basing that decision off of Dwayne Haskins maybe? Was he saying, this isn't the guy that I feel like, I can hang my hat on in Dwayne Haskins? You just don't know. You just don't know what he was basing that decision off if those reports are true that, it was his decision to just leave. As far as Scott Turner goes, I really dug deep into the tape because I won't lie, I didn't know too much about Scott Turner. And there's some things that I do like about Scott Turner's offense. I love that he uses motions. He's one of the top 5 coordinators in the league using motions. He motions a ton, and I love it. Creating mismatches, and another thing he does, he gets the ball to his playmakers quickly and in space. He's not worried about designing some elaborate route for his guys to get open. He just gives it to them and lets everyone get out their way. And you've got to love that. You just wonder if the Skins, do we have enough playmakers as of now to be able to operate like that? Scott Turner's coming from an offense where he had Christian McCaffrey, perhaps the best playmaker in the league right now. He had DJ Moore, a great young, speedy, shifty receiver. He had, what's my boy named, Curtis Samuels, another great, shifty receiver. And then they had tight end, they had Greg Olsen. And Scott Turner's a guy who uses a ton of tight ends from what I watched on film. The tight end dictates a lot in his offense. And as of now, we don't have a reliable one. So there's some things to unpack there, but overall, I can't say I was disappointed with the Scott Turner hire, but I also cannot say that I was really encouraged by it either. I think it was almost like I just got a kind of a wait and see feeling. I'm not totally down on it, but I'm not super pumped about him.
All right. So that is a lot to unpack. I'm going to try to sum that up because I feel like I feel the same way. The way I feel about losing KOC and Scott Turner is like I said, it was a gigantic upgrade from Minuski to Del Rio. This is more of a wash, really. This is more of you're losing a little something, but you're gaining a little something else, in my opinion. They're both up-and-coming offensive coordinators who really haven't done too much to say, like, what has Kevin O'Connell really done to say, oh, it's horrible that we're losing him? And what has Scott Turner done to say that, oh, well, we should definitely take him over a guy like Kevin O'Connell? And in my opinion, neither one of them have done enough to say anything too definitive. And as far as you breaking down how he uses his offense, I would say, he did have Christian McCaffrey and guys like that, but I'm not saying Darius Geis is going to be Christian McCaffrey, but he could be. He has that type of potential if he's healthy enough to at least make plays in that same manner. Terry McLaurin could probably flourish in an offense like this. But the key thing that you mentioned was the tight end position, and you also mentioned how basically right now you said we don't have a reliable one. I don't even know if we have one under contract technically. Right now I don't think the Redskins have any tight ends on the roster, but that's going to be a key thing going into the draft. Obviously, we'll get into that later in later pods and stuff once we start breaking down the drafts. But the Redskins are going to have to either find a tight end in free agency or in the draft because, like you said, Scott Turner utilizes the tight end very well, and that's a giant hole on the offense right now.
Yeah, man. Giant hole for sure. And it's got to be addressed. I'm sure they'll address it, but it's got to happen. You never know. Maybe it could be a guy like Greg Olsen coming following his old coach and his old coordinator. But we'll see with Scott Turner, man.
It can't be understated how important the tight end is as we go into the Super Bowl weekend. The two teams playing in the Super Bowl arguably have the best two tight ends in the game. So, yeah, that's got to be addressed. We'll probably be talking a lot about tight ends this offseason.
Yeah. So keeping it pushing, man. We've talked about the D coordinator. We've talked about the offensive coordinator. Now there's just one more position that's still yet to be filled, and that is position of GM. I mean, and you've got some guys that are probably candidates right now. You've got to think Ron Rivera is scoping out some of his old Carolina guys in their personnel department. And then you've got this guy that's ran our front office, well, at least our drafts for the past couple years, and Kyle Smith, who just received a promotion. How do you feel about the GM? Who is your preferred candidate? Which direction do you want to see us go? Do you want us to stay in-house, or do you want us to grab somebody from outside?
So the GM thing could really go any which way because I believe Ron is going to have some type of input into it. So there's some guys out there that he might want to go after, but then there's some guys that Dan might already have in mind in the same way that he kind of went and got Ron without too many people knowing. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the job. But the other thing I find interesting is that they're not going to – well, the word is that they're not going to pick one until after the draft. So which GM wants to come on board after you've already done an entire draft, you know what I mean? So that makes me feel like it might be someone who's already in-house, someone who already has their hands in on it, someone who knows what's going on. But if I had to pick, if this is fantasy booking and we're doing a fantasy draft for GMs, I would take Louis Riddick from ESPN, man. He used to work with the Skins before. He knows his football. Everybody knows that. And he seems to be right on brand with a Ron Rivera hire and a Jack Del Rio hire. He seems to be right on brand with that type of discipline. So I think it would be a perfect puzzle fit.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to Louis Riddick, man. He's always shown to have a knowledge of the game. Only thing with a guy like that is you just don't have any proof in his scouting. But maybe if you're bringing on Louis Riddick, you're asking him to be more of like the leader of the personnel group, you know, instead of maybe the lead scout, and you let Kyle Smith continue to be that guy. So I feel you on that, and I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. But if it was my decision, go ahead.
Oh, real quick before you go, to be clear, I don't really think it's going to be Louis Riddick. That's just who I would personally pick. I honestly think it could be a Kyle Smith or someone that's already in-house because the way they're going about it just makes me feel like it's got to be somebody in-house.
Yeah. And that brings me right to my the guy that I would choose. I would roll with Kyle Smith. I've been a proponent of his for some time now. I feel like, well, one, he's the son of the guy that used to be in L.A. with the Chargers. What's the guy's first name? I'm blanking on his first name right now, but his dad's a pretty well-known GM who did really good work with the Chargers, and I'm pretty sure that's where Ron Rivera comes from. So, I mean, there's some ties there. A.J. Smith is his name. His dad is A.J. Smith. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But, so, I mean, you've got some ties there. And then on top of that, man, Kyle Smith has shown himself to be a very good talent evaluator to me. I mean, I'm looking at guys he's brought in last draft. I mean, ESPN, awarded ESPN and Pro Football Focus both said we had the most productive, best drafts in the NFL. That doesn't happen by accident. And I think that 2 drafts in a row now, Kyle Smith has shown me that he knows how to pick players. He knows how to find guys late round, especially because when it comes to the early round picks, not that I could care less who we choose, but the chances of you hitting on an early round pick are, of course, much higher than hitting on a late round pick. When I see a GM hitting on 3rd rounders, 5th rounders, like 6th round, those are the money picks, and Kyle Smith hits on those. And I don't know, I just want to keep this guy around. I feel like the best way would just to be making him GM, and him and Ron Rivera. You got one young guy, you got one older guy. They can really bounce ideas off of each other, and that could really be a match that proves to be, successful. Yeah,
man, that makes all too much sense, which is why I was leaning towards that a little bit. But hey, man, if we're just picking it to pick it, I'm going with Louis Riddick just for the fun of it. But yeah, Kyle Smith could likely be the candidate. It'll be very interesting to see who they name though, because you just never know.
One thing, let me add this one thing. One more thing they could opt to do is they could just never hire a GM. I mean, Ron Rivera runs the football operation. Kyle Smith essentially, runs the college scouting and the pro scouting. So I mean, they don't have to necessarily pick a GM. They could just rock out the way they've got it if it shows to work. So we'll see, man.
Yeah, man, that is also a very strong option. But yeah, man, it'll definitely be interesting to see who they pick, because like I was saying earlier, what GM from outside the building is really going to want to come after the draft? You know what I mean? That seems a little bit strange to me. So if they don't pick someone in-house, maybe they just don't name a GM at all and rock with the current structure. But since we're talking draft, let's go ahead and jump into Chase Young, man, because that's been the hottest debate when it comes to who the Redskins should draft. Should they draft Chase Young or should they trade down? There's a ton of options here, but a lot of people are saying it'd be foolish to not draft Chase Young. So yeah, let's get this debate going, man. What are your thoughts on Chase Young or trade down?
Man, I could go so many ways with this, because let me start by saying that this draft is a special draft. I don't want to start comparing it to other drafts yet, because I haven't really got to the later rounds. But there's some real explosiveness on both sides of the ball in the first round of this draft. With that said, Chase Young is the most explosive out of all of the draft. So if you get a guy like that, man, you can pretty much pencil him in for being one of the top pass rushers in the league for the next 10 years. He fits the profile in every way. If he doesn't, it would be a miraculous bust, because he fits the profile in every way, everything you're looking for in a pass rusher. But if we get one of these teams like the Dolphins, who have 4 first-round picks, say they want to send us 3 of them, and say they send us all their picks and a swap, and we end up with all their first-round picks. I think they've got like 5, 17, and 28, and something late too, some even later. But imagine that. Let's say we get 3 first-round picks, and we're able to leave with an Isaiah Simmons, who's the best linebacker on the board, best middle linebacker on the board, a CeeDee Lamb, who might be the best receiver in the draft, and one of the top tackles in the first round. Like, I can't say no to that, no matter how good Chase Young is, because, those 2 players might both prove to be as good as Chase Young in the NFL. So it's just the draft is a crapshoot, and I just feel like in a crapshoot, the more shots you have, the more rolls you get of the dice, the better you get to do. So I would probably trade down depending on the deal, especially if it was like a team like the Dolphins, who has 3 first-round picks.
Yeah, man. It is a tough situation, because there's a lot of ways you could go. Right now, the Redskins only have, I believe, 6 total draft picks, and you can have up to 10 max. So, like you just said, the best way to go about it is to try to acquire as many players as you can. So it's an age-old question. Do you keep your number 2 spot and draft the absolute best player, or do you trade down and try to get opportunity to draft multiple players that are really good? So here's the scenario I came up with. because at first I was trade down. Everyone's, Chase Young's generation talent. Like we hear that every year from about one player at least. But everyone's telling you, you can't not draft Chase Young. And at first I was like, man, one football player is not going to win you a Super Bowl. You got to trade down. You got too many holes. But the more I read about Chase Young, the more I watched film on him and whatnot, I was like, okay, I'm sold on him. He is all that and then some. So this is what I came up with. Because Washington does not have a second-round pick. We absolutely have to have a second-round pick. You cannot go into this draft without a second-round pick. More second-round picks hit than first-round picks. But since you absolutely have to draft Chase Young, I say you draft Young second overall, and you trade either Ryan Kerrigan or Trent Williams for a second-round pick. Now, I know as a hardcore Redskins fans, that's painful to hear, the words trade Ryan Kerrigan or Trent Williams. But one of those players, maybe even both of those players, will get you a second-round pick, and you absolutely have to find a way to get a second-round pick going into this draft. And if you don't, I don't see how you can draft Chase Young second overall and justify not being able to recoup any other picks down the line. So that's my idea on how to get a second-round pick and still get the best player in the draft. What are your thoughts on a scenario like that, and what do you think the Redskins should do as far as only having 6 picks right now and no second-round pick?
Yeah, I think that one thing the Skins have proven in these past couple drafts is they've got very, very good draft guys that can move around the draft, acquire more picks, and they'll be able to wheel and deal before the draft is up. And like you said, though, the big question is about that second rounder. Would I be opposed to giving up a guy like Kerrigan or Trent? No, I wouldn't, especially not for Kerrigan, although I love him. I think that the other thing would be with Trent, it would just be really biting the bullet because we could have had the first-round pick. We could have had the first-round pick from the Browns for him. So just imagine where we would be sitting if we had that. But
Bruce Allen, man.
Good
old Bruce Allen.
Shout out to Brucifer. But yeah, man. So I'm on the fence about that. The only situation I think I'd really be okay with trading back is if we were able to work out a deal with Miami. Because if we get those 3 first-round picks, we don't even have to worry about the second round. And I just think that would be our best way. And hopefully one of these teams falls in love with one of these quarterbacks. Because that really decides our movement in the draft. We need one of these teams to fall in love with Tua. We need one of these teams to fall in love with Justin Herbert. Bryce, what's the dude? Love. Somebody needs to fall in love with these guys. Jordan Love. Somebody needs to fall in love with these guys, man. And because that just drives up our value. Imagine this, though. The third pick, I want to say, who drafts third this year? Do you know off the top?
I think it's the Lions draft after.
Yeah, the Lions.
I believe.
Yeah, you're right. Imagine if the Lions, who could be moving on from Matt Stafford, imagine they fall in love with Tua. This is for a second, Skins Nation. Imagine the Lions fall in love with Tua, and they've got the third pick, and they know that Miami wants to come get Tua at number 2. We could perhaps get a swap for the second and third pick without really getting rid of nothing. Still get our guy in Chase Young, add a second round draft pick to go along with it by just moving down 1, still getting our guy. So that is also another scenario to keep your eyes on. The Lions falling in love with Tua, trying to trade up to that second pick. It's not out of the question.
I like that scenario better than my scenario. That way we can keep Kerrigan, keep Trent, or trade them for another pick or something. And I really like that scenario. And that's something to keep your eye on, man. The draft time is crazy and it's very unpredictable. So who knows what will happen, man. I'm sure the closer we get to the draft, we'll probably even hear rumors of the Redskins falling in love with Tua because it doesn't sound too good for Dwayne as far as starting. Let's backtrack real quick because that is one thing I did want to get into before we finish up here. The new offensive coordinator and how that's going to affect Dwayne. I meant to throw that question to you earlier in the pod, man. So how do you think bringing in Scott Turner is going to affect Dwayne Haskins? Because we all know he had his struggles learning the offense or whatever with Jay and Kevin O'Connell, and he built a relationship with KOC, who's now gone. So how do you think the Scott Turner-Dwayne Haskins relationship is going to go, and how important is that to the success of not only Haskins but the team for next season?
Oh, man, very, very, very important. Right now, we can only look at it on his face. So we got to just listen to what Scott Turner said about Dwayne Haskins. And from everything he said that I've heard, he seems to really like Haskins and really be interested in the possibilities and the potential of what they could do teaming together. So I think that Scott Turner likes Haskins, but I do believe that this coaching staff is purposely, on all levels, head coach down to the coordinators, they're purposely speaking in a certain language as to motivate Haskins. Now, we just don't know what type of motivation he takes. Everyone's motivation, it takes a little different. Some people, what they say, some need the carrot, some need the whip, And I think they're trying to test his motivation. I don't think there's a doubt of him starting next season, honestly, personally. I think Dwayne Haskins, we can pencil him in as our starter. But I just think they're trying to push him. And I think Scott Turner, from everything I've read on the relationship he built with Cam Newton, and to me, this is obviously, I don't know these guys. This is just from what I've observed. Cam Newton and Dwayne Haskins seem to be similar personalities, just a little bit. So my thought is that if, Scott Turner and Cam Newton build this great relationship, I would expect the same for him and Dwayne.
Yeah, I think it'll be huge, their relationship going forward. And I agree with you because I read a lot about his relationship with Cam as well. And we should also mention that the quarterback coach, Ken Zampese, is also a really well-regarded QB coach who will also be working with Haskins, and I think that'll be a big deal and helpful for Dwayne. But yeah, man, I'm not as sold as you are on the motivation that these coaches are allegedly giving Dwayne. I'm not completely sure that he will be the starter or I don't think it's a situation where he's gonna just come into training camp and it's a given. I think they're gonna really, really, really make him earn it. Which could be a good thing. But yeah, I'll agree with you saying that we can pencil him in because it should only be in pencil because by the time August or September come around, we might have to erase that and replace it with a veteran quarterback's game. But that'll be something else that's interesting too, is to see who they bring in, because it sounds like Case Keenum's on his way out. Who they bring in to back up Dwayne, that'll tell us a lot about what they really think about him as well. So, yeah, man, before we wrap this pod up, is there anything else you wanted to go in there?
Nah, man. I mean, I just think it'll be interesting to watch, man, what the Skins will do with Dwayne Haskins. I got trust in this regime. I'm putting my faith in Ron Rivera and the team he's put together. So I just can't wait, man. I just can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Most definitely, man, and we'll definitely be back sooner than later. We got a lot to talk about this off season between the draft and free agency. Lots of holes to fill, and I mean, come on now, we're following the Washington Redskins. I'm sure there'll be some type of crazy news to pop up before we get into the draft or training camp or anything. I'm sure something wild will happen, as always. Oh yeah, man, let's jump into this stadium news real quick. Let's touch on that real quick. We didn't even get into that too much. Let's give our thoughts real quick on where we think the stadium should be and where you think the stadium will actually end up. Because the lease on FedEx, I believe, is up in 2027, and Snyder was trying to get this gambling thing going, man. So what do you think is going to happen with the new stadium?
Well, man, first I'll start off with what I would like to see happen. I'm a DC guy, man. Well, at least DMV, I should say. Born in DC, raised in PG County. I mean, there's no other place. I feel like there's only two options. You either keep the land oversight, you redo it, and make it what it should have been to begin with, or you go back to DC to the RFK site. The last place I would like the team to be, hate to say it wrong, but is VA. And because chances are where they will be going in VA would be what we call the sticks. It would be out there. It would be out there. It would be probably not too far from their training facility where it is now in Ashburn. And that would just be a hike that I would not look forward to taking to go to Skins games. And it could definitely cause some fans from this side from the DC, PG County side to, just abandoning going to the games altogether. So if it's up to me, I'd say, keep it in. If it's really up to me, I'd say put it in the city. I think that's really where it's really got to be. But if I had to guess, I'd say it either stays in the Landover location or they take it out to Virginia, somewhere far.
All right, so I can pretty much confirm that it will not be in Virginia. The options are too limited. You bring up a very good point. If you put it in the sticks, because I'm much like you. I'm born in D.C., but instead of PG, I went the opposite way to Virginia. So I mean, we pretty much live the same life, just opposite directions. But being in Virginia, I can tell you that there's really nowhere for them to put it in Ashburn that would make any sense. I lived out there about a year ago, so there's really nowhere for a stadium to go that would make a ton of sense. So if I had to pick for myself where it would be, and this is probably close to impossible, but I would pick the National Harbor or as close to the National Harbor as they could get it. I just think that would be the most fun spot for fans. It would be a huge attraction. You could bring people from out of town would love that. People around here would love it. You could do other things with the stadium other than just football games. It would make it a year-round attraction to come to. People who want to hold events there, I'm sure. So there's always that star appeal if you were to do it at the National Harbor. And then if I had to say where it's going to end up being, it's probably going to stay at FedEx right over there in Landover. That's not my favorite spot. I don't mind traveling there. I think the traffic's going to suck regardless of wherever you put a stadium. I mean, it's a stadium. You're getting all those people in one spot. The traffic's going to suck regardless. But I wouldn't be opposed to them redoing Landover and revamping it. But the way the stadium is now, man, I would, dare I say, it's probably the least enjoyable stadium to go to of any of the DC sports teams. Is that too far? Would you agree with that?
No, 100%, bro, 100%. I've been in every level of that stadium. It's the worst experience, and it's just an old stadium, bro. It makes you feel like you're like, I don't know, man. You would look on TV and you look at these stadiums. They always look so crazy, man. And ours is just like, it's just super regular, man. And you can get away with like a super regular old stadium if it's got that tradition. But RFK was where the tradition was, and we left there.
Yeah.
So there's no tradition to go along with it. So it's like it's just an outdated structure.
Yeah, the last time I went to FedEx, it wasn't enjoyable, and we won the game, and it wasn't enjoyable. But yeah, so hopefully, man, at the very least, they just revamp it, man. I think it would be cool to have it in a new location, but all those things get very political and very, very nasty under the table stuff happens that we're not even gonna get into. But yeah, man, that pretty much wraps it up for this pod, man. So you guys definitely be on the lookout for the next one. Download the Gas Sports app if you haven't already. Follow us on Twitter. Yeah, anything you want to add, bro?
Nah, man, I think we just hit just about everything today. Like we started off the pod with, man, rest in peace to the late great Kobe Bean Bryant. Just implore everybody to live with that Mamba mentality for the rest of 2020.
My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so weak. My hitters be moving and shaking to stay out the streets. Your hitters be hating, your hitters be looking so. Snuff the shooter, snuff the looter, snuff the booster, snuff the money mover. Snuff the hater, snuff the player, snuff your hairline, tape up and shape up. Snuff the shooter, snuff the looter, snuff the booster, snuff the